Source Code, second feature from Duncan Jones, who, if you remember, was a guest. What? Why are you doing that face?
Because you were already trying to work out whether to say son of David Bowie.
I didn't know. I wasn't going to say. No,
you were.
You just said to Jim Loach, right?
Yes.
You only have to say this now. Once you get into your second film, we won't do it.
I wasn't going to say it, but you clearly were thinking about it.
How could you know? How can you possibly? That's honestly, that is the cause of so much trouble in relationships. I know what you're thinking. No, you don't.
I think I'm right.
Duncan Jones, who I was going to say was actually the Kermode Award winner for Best Director for his feature film Moon, and who came on the programme in Edinburgh, and who you said, Duncan Jones, son
Nice
of...
chap.
Yeah, very nice, and a very, very good director. Moon was really interesting. Not a very big budget movie, but a movie that was like a 70s throwback science fiction movie in that it was a film that was based on ideas rather than special effects. It was a film that had a sort of conceptual heart rather than a just ABC narrative heart. It was a film that wanted to tell a story in an interesting way. So anyway, next movie, Source Code. Here's the essential setup. Jake Gyllenhaal wakes up on a train in America. He appears to be mid-discussion with Michelle Monaghan's Christina Warren, who she is referring to him as Sean. She thinks he's Sean Fentress. He, however, firstly doesn't know where he is. Secondly, doesn't know who this Sean guy is. Thinks that he's called Colter Stevens, who's somebody who's been out fighting in Afghanistan. Then, 8 minutes into their completely befuddled conversation, there's a massive explosion, which we think is a terrorist attack, which apparently would wipe out everybody. But he then wakes up in a capsule, has no idea where he is. On the screen, television screen, is Vera Farmiga as his unknown commanding officer, explaining to him that in fact he has been taken and put into this situation as a result of a new secret scientific project called the Source Code. Here's a clip.
At 7:48 this morning, Central Standard Time, a bomb exploded on a commuter train outside of Chicago, killing everyone on board. And that's the train that you've been on.
No, I'm right here. You're talking to me right now.
A man named Sean Fentress was on that train. He, for all intents and purposes, is now you. Every second spent explaining things puts more innocent civilians at risk.
This makes no sense.
Now, did you find the bomb?
In the restroom. Ventilation panel above the sink.
So a number of things to say about this. First is, it's really good, and I really enjoyed it. I'm sort of tempted to say, the world has changed since Inception. Obviously, I understand that movies are in production whilst other things are in production, so it's not like Inception was made and then suddenly we had the Adjustment Bureau and suddenly we have this as a result. But one of the things that happened when Inception was a big hit was the realisation that it is possible to make really good movies and make them really intelligent, and that the whole idea that, the Michael Bay idea, the only way you can be a big movie is to be a stupid movie, that in order to appease the mainstream, you have to be as dumb as possible, simply isn't true. And whether by coincidence or by effect, in the wake of Inception, we've had a couple of movies which have done really, really well, which are science fiction movies, but old-fashioned science fiction movies in that they are ideas movies. I mean, science fiction at its heart is a genre of ideas. It's a way of taking complicated ideas and talking about them in a pulpy, popular fashion that's entertaining and enjoyable, but can also deal with quite complicated concepts. Watching this, one of the things it reminded me of was, the author Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah, I do indeed.
And Kurt Vonnegut, who wrote about Billy Pilgrim in Slaughterhouse-Five, and also Kurt Vonnegut invented this science fiction author, Kilgore Trout. And regularly throughout Kurt Vonnegut's fiction, he would say, Kilgore Trout once wrote a story in which, and then he'd do a sort of little science fiction plot synopsis that often played out like a Twilight Zone idea. A single idea, but spun out into a sort of a like candy floss-like psychological confection in a way that worked really well. And Kurt Vonnegut said one of the problems with science fiction is that the ideas are brilliant, but often the writing isn't so great. In the case of this, it's really well executed. It's a simple idea. You keep going back to the same 8 minutes, and what our central character has to do is, in that 8 minutes, he has to find out who planted the bomb. But during the course of going over and over this same, like Groundhog Day, over this same bit of time, every time he does it, they're running out of time in the real world, and every time he does it, things change slightly. And it's a really well executed, one idea, played out, in a way which is engrossing. And yes, it's in the way that the best science fiction is, there's an element of ridiculousness about it, but it takes itself seriously enough and it plays itself straight enough that you accept the premise and you accept the fact that it's dealing with fairly highfalutin ideas in a very, very enjoyable pulp entertainment way, and in exactly the same way that Moon looked like a movie made by somebody who'd grown up on Silent Running and Soylent Green and Solaris and all those other sort of effectively science fiction fiction movies about ideas. I mean, this has a much bigger budget, has much bigger special effects, but it is essentially a drama about two people living the same 8 minutes over and over again, and every time they look at it like a Rubik's Cube, every time it changes slightly. And it's the question of, if you change something slightly, is it possible to change the, is the future changeable, is the past changeable? There's one lovely line in it which he says to Vera Farmiga's character: do you ever think that there's another version of you that didn't get divorced, that there's another version of you that didn't marry that guy, that lived another life? And she says no. And that's the central concept of this. Are we? Is it a what's they call it, a multi-universe or
multiverse?
Is it a multiverse or a universe? And that's, as I said, it's fairly.
And is it?
Well,
is it a multiverse?
That would be giving away the ending, wouldn't it? But in the way of all well-directed science fiction, it raises that idea, it plays with it, it teases it, it does it from a number of different angles, and it makes you come out thinking, I've watched a solid, satisfying character drama with a romance at the centre of it, which reminded me a little bit of The Adjustment Bureau, with great, exciting visuals, doesn't look like it's been overproduced, has a good idea at its centre and plays it out really well. He is a really smart director, and as long as he can keep his feet in the 70s sci-fi and doesn't suddenly realise, we have to move into the 21st century of 3D and Michael Bay, everything will be all right.